Good morning. Today I am going to demonstrate what I have arrived at as a pretty solid ink and paint process. It's taken a while to come up with it, and I guess I will also explain why I will not be waiting for Blender 2.8. Um, Basically, I've looked at 2.8, I downloaded the beta, and it's good. There's some cool things they have implemented. The biggest one probably being a fill function, which means you can have two completely separate grease pencil objects that form a closed space in one way or another, and you can fill between them. So, for example, I'll give you a little demonstration of what that looks like. Okay, so if I draw this shape and then I draw this shape, and I don't want to necessarily use a solid fill color like this. Okay, so in other words, I don't want to work with the grease pencil objects as objects. I just want to deal with it as a drawing and deal with the paint later. I won't get into the reasons why, but there's a lot of reasons why that is a preferable workflow in many circumstances. With Blender 2.8, you will be able to click right here. And actually, let me give you an even better example. Let me draw this shape like that. Okay, with Blender 2.8, you would be able to click in this space here and fill that area with color. And what it does is it forms a new grease pencil object that's, I believe, if I recall correctly, it's going to be filled with whatever color is currently selected, so it will either have a stroke and a fill or not, depending on which color is selected when you do the fill operation. Okay, so that aspect of it is cool. All the stuff about grease pencil objects being actual objects, so you can have several of them in a scene. It's all cool, but I don't know that it's so compelling that it's worth waiting for, because um, traditional anime workflow is kind of well established, and I think that if we're willing to go outside of Blender, we do have the tools to do what we want to do. So for demonstration purposes, here's this character, and right now I'm just going to check that I'm just checking to make sure my screen capture is recording. I did a video the other day and found out all was not well and wound up having to throw it all out. Okay, so I've got this short animation, and I've just worked out the timing. So this guy's gonna say something, and so I know that this is what I want to do. So now the question becomes, how am I going to do it? Well, because the only thing that's moving is his mouth, I'm going to go ahead and create a static image of everything else. So I've already done the inking process, so I'm going to go ahead and kill the sketch layer and turn on this layer. So now you can see we have just this outline of the guy. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and render that and save it. I'm hitting F3 to save, and we'll go ahead and save this on my RAM drive and just call it untitled. That's fine. I'm going to jump over here to my RAM drive, and untitled ping, I'm going to drag it into Krita. Okay, so now in Krita, there are a couple things that are significant about ink and paint. One, I can add another layer, put it below the layer that has my outlines, and I can actually do a fill operation into the layer below. Okay, so that's really cool, because that means that my outlines are always over top. And in my tool options, I can grow the selection by 1 pixel, give it a feathering radius of 1 pixel. As a result, as you will see, I can go ahead and, oops, this needs to be full opacity. Okay, so I can go ahead and fill this in and just come up with a sort of a flesh tone. And I'll just come up with a color for the hair. Okay. And another advantage with Krita is I can just go ahead and use a brush if I want to deal with the whites of his eyes, like so. And I'm not claiming that this is perfect because frankly I would want a little better brush for that operation. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just save this. Okay. And now I can bring it, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my ink layer and bring in that image that I just colored as a background image and turn up the opacity to full. Now over top of that background image, I went ahead and did the mouth animation, and I also added some shadows. Okay, so now you can see what's going on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to render that entire sequence. Okay, so I'm going to go over here, and this is also going to be saved on the RAM disk. Image out, and I'm going to accept that, and Control F10. And now let's just wait a minute for that to render. And then I'm going to show you what we can do in Krita that really puts the final icing on the cake, as it were. In fact, what I discovered today effectively makes doing these shadows and stuff in Blender unnecessary, which is kind of a good thing because if I had known yesterday what I know today, what I would have done is actually, I turn this off, I would have gone ahead and taken the mouth animation and rendered this whole thing out as a sequence and then dealt with all the color in Krita. In fact, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and call this. So we've got Blender is the sequence that's colored, and I'm going to call this Blender, let's call this outlines. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and render that too. That way I can go ahead and demonstrate both ways of working in Krita. So that's going to render out. Hopefully we won't have any problems with this outline being clean enough. But okay, so the first thing we're going to do is jump over to Krita and let's talk about coloring methodology, and then we'll get into how you deal with actual sequence of animated frames. In this case, I've already colored it in, as we already demonstrated. So now what if we want to add like some shadows or something? Well, what you do is you add a layer over top of it, and then this is the key right here, inherit alpha. If you turn on inherit alpha, now I can paint over this layer like so, turn the opacity down, and instantly have some pretty nice production value very, very quickly. And in fact, I could go and add some of the highlights on the hair and this sort of thing as well. Now, if I wanted to layer up my shadows and add some thickness to them, and I'm actually going to undo that because I don't particularly like what I did there. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and just give a little scumble there. Okay, so now if I save this image, again, the alpha channel is preserved. I could bring that back into Blender, map it to a plane, and do whatever I need to do with it. Okay, but what if you wanted to work with the image sequence in Krita? Let's do that. So we're going to create a new image, and I'm going to File, Import Animation Frames. I'm going to go to my X drive, and I believe it was outlines was that what we were interested in. I'm gonna hit shift and go ahead and load up that sequence. Shift. There we go. Open. All right, so now Krita is going to go ahead and bring in the sequence. So now I think I had 46 frames, so I'll just change this to 46. And as I like to say, save early, save often. So I'll just save this with a stupid file name on the root of my RAM drive. Because it is playing off of a RAM drive, it's gonna regenerate. What I should pause and quit moving so fast. Okay, when you make some changes in Krita to an animation, and then you go to play back the animation, it has to do what's called regenerating the cache. So basically, it's storing up all those images in memory so that they play back at a full 24 frames a second. Well, if you've stored your images on a RAM drive, which is what I'm doing, then regenerating the cache is really, really fast. Okay, so now I can go ahead and play this back, as you can see. So now this is where we're going to see one of the strengths of Krita in terms of doing color. If I were to do this coloring operation in Blender, I would have to go ahead and paint in every single frame. In Krita, that's not the case. In Krita, I can go here, and let's just go ahead and I just hit a hotkey. I shouldn't have done that. Let me remove that frame. Okay. What Krita has is either new frame or copy frame. So I've mapped the insert key to create a new frame. So the reason I did that is so that animation is already turned on, if you will, for this layer. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just deal with our paint operations. Okay, just like we did before. And I'm not going to be too picky about what the colors are because we're just trying to demonstrate. All right, and I'll even do it the way I did it before in terms of, excuse me, dealing with the whites of the eyes. I'm going to go ahead and hit shift and drag to make my marker a little bit smaller. And again, we're not being super picky because I just want to show you how this will be done. Okay, and let's go ahead and make his eyes a little bit, let's just zoom in and make it so we can see what we're doing. Okay, and then maybe a little highlight. There's more we could do, but for now, let's, again, save early, save often. Okay, and I think it takes a while to save just because there's so many animation frames here, so it's big, it's a big file. So regenerating the cache, fortunately, is very quick. And you can kind of see the problem that we're going to have. Well, the good thing with Krita is if that because there's only one keyframe on the color layer, we don't have to color in every frame. Okay. Now here we definitely have a problem. And so let's address that. And I can address it very, very quickly. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit the P key, which in Krita is sort of the eyedropper sampler thing. Okay, and then go ahead and I'm just gonna paint by hand to fix the flaws. Okay, good. That's it. So hate to take the time to save early, save often, but I have to say, in the big scheme of things, Krita is a little less stable than Blender, and I don't totally trust it, especially when you're using a lot of memory. When it's a large file with a lot of animation frames, Krita does have a tendency to crash more often than Blender does. Okay, so now I want to deal with shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and add another layer, put it up top, and we're going to have it inherit the alpha. Let's go to black, turn the opacity down to like 14% will probably work. And then say, well, okay, how do we want this guy to look? Well, let's go ahead and let's put him largely in shadow like this. All right. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and put another layer up top. Let's put this in additive mode. And I want to turn my opacity up all the way, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that like that. Again, save early, save often. It's always worth taking the time to save your work. Okay. And then once that's done saving, I'm going to go ahead and add a Gaussian blur filter to that layer. Okay, so now that's interesting. We'll take a look at that. Not sure why that's dealing with its own alpha channel the way it is. Let me take a look at the settings on that layer. Yeah, if we inherit the alpha, I think that, well, what I was going to do is just put like a glow over top, but for now I think I'm going to go ahead and let that one go because I don't want to take the time to solve the technical problem right now. But in the shadow layer, I certainly could, oopsie poo. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that is my shadow layer. See, okay, let me make a point here. Let me go ahead and kill the shadow layer and let's do it again. I'm going to show you. There's two strategies you might want to employ here. Make sure you turn on inherit alpha. Okay, if you want to be able to draw as many shadows as you want, and it doesn't matter if you lift your pen up off the page, so to speak, it's all going to be the same darkness, if you will, as long as you turn down the opacity of the layer. If you want a little more control, we'll add another layer. Again, inherit alpha. Turn the opacity of the brush down. Okay, so now what I can do is I could go ahead and as long as I don't lift up my brush, this is all going to be the same density. But then if I lift my brush, the shadows, the 10%, well, it's actually 13% opacity that you have, layers up on top of itself. And each time you put your pen down, it gets a little darker. So for like this area under the neck, it'd be nice to have that flexibility. Okay, again, save early, save often. Now, while that's saving, I'm going to come over to Blender and I'm going to go ahead and turn off all these layers and I'm going to add images as planes, shadeless, animate image sequences. Let's go to the RAM disk, go to image out, and we're going to grab outlines. Blender is not quite as smart as I would wish in the sense of grabbing all of them, but okay. Import images as planes. It should recognize that it is a image sequence. So let's turn on the texture. And because I can't see it, that probably means that there's a problem with the image sequence being set up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and go to outlines. Whoops. Okay. 46 frames. Actually, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. It's there. I just couldn't really see it because it's just outlines, see? Okay, so that's cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to come back here and let's just take a look at what we have. Works for me. Okay, so we've been able to add shadows. There is a bit of a problem with the shadow under the lip here. That really should be animated. Um, and hence, in fact, it should have been on a separate layer. So if I really want to do the right thing, I'm going to go ahead and kill that, add another layer, inherit alpha, insert a keyframe, and let's go ahead and deal with the mouth. Right there. Insert a keyframe. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I gotta go to the next frame. Insert a key. Probably should zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. Insert a keyframe. Insert a keyframe. Again, insert a keyframe. Same thing. As long as I don't lift up my brush. Okay, I think that's all we have. As usual, save early, save often. Now, because Krita has cached these animation frames in memory, I'm pretty sure we can go ahead and save back over the original frames that we loaded in. So let's render the animation, and the render location is going to be the same location as before. This is kind of a flaw here in Krita. It doesn't really give me a way to look um, at thumbnails of the images that I am, because like if I want to save over them, I want to open this, I want to see the images in there, and I want to see thumbnails. And I'm pretty sure Krita's not going to let me. Like in this dialog, it's just letting me choose the directory. So there's no way to look at the images if I want a visual reference to decide where I want to save them or whatever. In this case, I'm wanting to save over the outlines .ping sequence. So I don't know how this is going to go, but we'll give it a crack. Image out, 46 frames. So let's just go ahead and, it says frames with the same naming scheme exist, so that's good. We're gonna go ahead and render over them. So that's great. Okay, because what that means is when I come back to Blender, it's gonna dynamically update. I'll show you. Go back here and reload the current image from disk. I don't know if it reloaded the whole sequence. It looks like it did. So if I hit Control A over here, and by the way, when I go back to my 3D view, okay. Well, I will say that if I had loaded this in as a background image, it would be, I know it would be updating properly. So I need to look at why it's not. Do we need to look at the material? You know, this tends to happen when I make these videos, is all of a sudden I bump into something I didn't expect, and now I have to waste your time sitting there thinking about why it's acting silly. Okay, and I don't want to do that. So I will suffice to say that under normal circumstances, if I import images as planes, I mean, I guess we can try it again. The thing that's uncool here is, let's go ahead and delete that. The thing that's uncool is that I should be able to go ahead and just load up the image sequence. And it's going to it's just going to update dynamically. So in other words, if I changed it from another program like Krita, it's going to update dynamically. Okay, so it's kind of cool because I can do work in Blender, jump over to Krita, do some more work on the same image sequence, and it just works. It all just updates. So this needs to be full opacity. So the only disadvantage here is that I can't animate the position of this head. If in fact this head were going to be glued to a body and that body was animated, then we would really need to be able to move it around. So officially, the video for today is over. And if you're happy that you learned how to do ink and paint in Krita, then you can quit. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to figure out why that image sequence mapped to the plane was not animating properly. Let's just figure it out. I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add images as planes. It's shadeless material, animate image sequences. Let's drag over here. Select those guys. Okay, and now when I hit A to animate, it's not updating. So that's what we want to figure out. Would it help if we were on material instead of texture? Yes. Okay, there you go. Apparently that was the problem. So now, this could be obviously glued to a body, scaled and animated, whatever we want to do. If you're really interested in this sort of thing, I believe you also could subdivide it, subdivide it, subdivide it, about like that. And then let's just see what happens if you're anal about having planes that more or less match the dimensions of the images that are mapped to them. Then you could actually do that as well. Okay, and most significantly, now let's go ahead and turn on automatic keyframing, and let's jump over here to the animation options. Okay, I'm going to put this in edit mode. I'm going to turn on points with the Animal plugin, which comes with Blender. You just have to activate it. Okay, and now I'm going to increase the influence here, and then I don't really have a plan for this. I'm just gonna kind of wing it. All right, so what I want to do here is I'm gonna hit the period key so that I'm rotating from the neck. Expand that influence a bit. Whoopsie poo. Okay, and I need to insert a keyframe. Go back here, size it on the Z, insert a keyframe, jump out of edit mode, and I believe, okay, that looks about as stupid as possible. And since I don't want it to look as stupid as possible, I'm going to jump into my dope sheet and go ahead and knock out those keyframes. Actually, are these the keyframes for the animal animation? It looks like they are. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Appreciate your patience. I think the point is taken though. You can now take this image that's mapped to a plane and you can do whatever you want with it. Okay, so if you had a little better planning, and frankly, if the mesh was subdivided better, then you would have, I'm sorry, I'm not finishing my sentences. I can't do two things at once. I'm merely a man. I do not multitask well. Okay, it is what it is. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if this was subdivided a lot more, you could have a lot more control over individual parts of the body. Um, so, for example, when he opens his mouth, you might do this a little bit. So let's just go ahead and follow that through and see how that goes. Okay. Since we're here and we're doing it, let's just do it. Okay, so I'm going to go through. Okay, right there. Boom. Insert. And again, I have no idea how this is going to look. I'm actually trying to move pretty fast here. So this is really for demonstration purposes. In other words, for example, normally I would subdivide this more. Number two, I would probably, for what I'm trying to do, let me just slow down a bit and show you. What I would actually do is I would grab these 2 points and I would go scale on the z-axis in order to sort of squeeze them together like that, right? Something of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I'm at frame 31. Jump out of edit mode. Let's just see what we got. You know, it might look completely stupid, but yeah, it does. It looks completely stupid. Anytime you have 2 keyframes like close together like that. But what we could do is we could select all these keyframes, hit the T key, and change them to constant interpolation, and that probably is going to make it look a little better. Let's go back into camera view. Okay, so the point here is just to show you what the possibilities are. You can create your outlines in Blender with a grease pencil. You can do your coloring and shadows and all the stuff that really makes it look professional in Krita. Come back, map it to a plane. Um, you know, maybe articulate it with bones or whatever you want to do. You can deform it with the animal plugin. So pretty much all the pieces that you need to do what you want to do are there. And so with that, I'm going to sign off and hope you learned something today. Thanks.